can't handle the truth.
Oh, yeah, I'd like to ask you, Firstest.
You can't handle the truth.
I think we've covered this, haven't we?
I don't give a damn what you think you are entitled to. You can't handle the truth. Are we clear, Colonel? You can't handle the truth.
But there's also a number of questions that we have here from some kind commenters that I think we can get into maybe at the end, because it actually makes some fairly good points that I think are worthy of discussion. So we can...
we could do them now.
We could do them now? Okay. Well, I'll read them, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
So this is from Red Praxis Circle 8500. I'm glad he's got a normal name and not an offensive one. Love Dr. Hyatt. Keep it up. Can you do one of those, one, I suppose he means episode, that focuses more on his undoing book? I have been practicing his Energized meditation exercises for 2 months, and I'm starting to get results. I don't think we'll do an entire episode on that book, but I was thinking we could just discuss it. So 2 months in, starting to get results from the undoing book. I presume the part he's doing is when Dr. Hyatt goes through the that kind of full body tour type thing, how you start from the head, you go to the eyes, throat, chest, blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of like a progressive exercise. I don't know if you remember that section of the book.
Yeah, there's a couple of experiments, and then it's like a section called the method.
Yeah, that's it.
You're doing various things with making sounds and paying attention to your mouth and throat, and and then looking at different body parts. Yeah,
which is the proto, I would say, proto example of what the actual full radical undoing course is kind of like, because I guess you don't start with the whole body straight away. So you're meant to do obviously sections. You start from top, go down to bottom. But I also remember doing those exercises, a long, long time ago when I first got this book. It was very interesting because I got a lot of results very quickly from doing this. And I'd been doing yoga for maybe some time at this point. I'm talking maybe 15 years ago now. Fuck, I'm old. And I got some really out there experiences from doing this. I got probably one experience in particular that I remember very clearly, where I was doing the leg lift exercise, which is where you're kind of lying down and you lift your legs up, you hold them there, then you drop them. And I've been experimenting with this method for maybe a couple of months at this point. And I remember really enjoying that exercise. It's actually an exercise that I enjoy doing to this day. And it's something that I use for my breathing work because it really opens up that part of the abdomen, which is quite important.
So this is the one where you're lying on your back with your knees pointing upward. Your feet are close to your ass, basically, and you drop your legs outward. Is that it?
No. So it's the one where your legs are straight out in front of you. There's no bend, and you lift them up and hold them up for a while, and then you just let them drop. And because you're engaging your abdominal muscles to do this, what happens is that when you let go and you let gravity do that for you, and of course gravity is a really important part of the whole process, it really opens up your lower abdomen. It's a fantastic exercise. I use it all the time to this day, and particularly for my clients. Just quickly, yeah. Go. Sorry, go on.
You go for it. Yeah.
Just going to say
say this.
Yeah. No, you go first.
We're too far away from each other in the world to synchronize the talking. I was just going to say it's a demonstration of it's like the tension release method, basically. So you're like holding up and tensing, and then you're dropping and then releasing, and that's kind of how it works.
Yeah, exactly, precisely. Yeah, and it has this very striking effect. So I've had a number of people who literally can't breathe deeply. And I use this with them all the time. And yeah, you should see their eyes when they realize that there's this whole section of their body that they can actually breathe into. Like, it's like they can't believe it. So it's very effective for that. But I remember doing that
people who are their breathing is tight up in they're restricted up in their upper chest area.
Yeah. So I split people up into 3 groups quickly. So you have people who shoulder breathe, you have people that chest breathe, then you have people that can breathe deeply, but they have a very weak breath. It's not a strong breath. Like the tonus of the abdominal muscles is very poor. And typically everyone is some species of all 3 of these things. No one's really a pure shoulder breather, but the people that, have trouble are typically very much up in their upper chest, in their shoulders, and their recruiting muscles in the neck, that kind of thing. So anyway, I'd been doing this exercise for, quite a while and just really enjoying it. And I just remember having this experience where all of a sudden I just had this explosion of, I think what you say, gooey, squishy, pleasant sensations just explode. And I was floored for maybe 5 or 6 hours. Like, it was so enjoyable just to lie down and not do anything. I just lay there for that long. And I did, moving ruined it. So like every time I'd move, the pleasant flow of energy that was going all around my body would just kind of stop a little bit, so I wouldn't move. So I remember just being stuck in one place, consciously, like I don't want to move because this feels really good. I was there for hours. I don't know if it was 5 or 6, but it was a really long time. Like, it was, ages before I got up. And then it remained even through the afternoon. And I remember just still feeling really good. And that lasted for maybe 2 or 3 days. And that really, that happened 2 or 3 months of doing it very regularly. So there's definitely power in that exercise in that book, I think. I don't know what I got out of it. Just trying to think. Was there something permanent and lasting? It was a long time ago. It's hard to tell. I could just be making up stories. I think that looking back, there was some kind of loosening up that happened. But I do remember being very surprised just at the intensity of the sensations and the pleasantness of it. And that really proved to me that there's something going on. So I'd recommend to this gentleman that probably it's worth looking at the full course as opposed to just doing that full body tour. Although you could continue to do that, probably, I think, every now and then. I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you have any thoughts?
I don't want to. People should take my advice with a pinch of salt, because it's a long time since I've done the exercises in the orthodox way that he teaches them.
Likewise,
so,
just as an aside, me too.
Slightly different things now. But I do know. I remember when I did those experiments in the method at the first part of the Undoing book. It blew my mind intellectually, because I hadn't really noticed. I mean, I think I was about 20 when I did this. I hadn't noticed how connected sounds and words are with your body. I'd been very kind of abstracted up in my head, stuck in my head, kind of words separate from the body. And then when I started making it, like, it was like he gets you to start making basic noises, sounds, abba, and baby noises. And I remember that I was like, oh, holy shit! These two sides are interacting all the time, the throat and the face and all that stuff, as you're saying these words, and then realizing all the time you're speaking, all this is happening. And it kind of started putting the mind-body split back together for me at that point. As far as like big bursts of sensations and stuff, it was later with leg stuff. You were talking about leg stuff that kicked off for me. It was the dropping the knees outward. I don't know, is that in the book or is that in the course?
I think it's in the course. I don't think it's in the book.
There's also some other parts at the end. It's either that book or there's also another. Maybe it's the Tantra book where he's got some of the leg exercises. I think it's the Tantra book he actually has those in. One of them. But when I had that, there was like two kinds of sensation energies you notice. There was the tension release of the built up, the release of the tensions that were built up in your muscles, which are sometimes you don't even know you're holding on to them. You've got this real rigid tightness, and then it's only when you start doing practices like this you start becoming aware of the tension, and then you start releasing the tension, and it's usually pleasurable because you're uptight about it. It has all sorts of knock-on effects where something else triggers something else. Like it doesn't just. It's not all just simply just letting air out of a tire or something, and you just gradually get less and less. It triggers other tensions in other areas when you start releasing in random areas and stuff. It's complicated. But anyway, there was that type of energy where you just release the pleasure of releasing the uptightness. And then with the leg stuff, I noticed it was energies up and down the spine. I would start getting buzzing in the spine, which obviously goes along with all the Kundalini and the different ways of talking about it that people have had in different traditions. So, and then over time, the two of those things it was hard to distinguish what was what and what was real and what wasn't. What you're just leaning into, then you become a little bit. It triggers it. Well, it triggered addictive behavior in me. I kept chasing the good feelings again, which is preventing you from being open to other new feelings, because you're trying to repeat the same one that you had before. Whereas the first blast of the feelings and the sensations came to you because you had no expectations. You're surprised by it. So you're not trying to make something happen. You're just open to it. You're trying a new practice, and then something happens. You're surprised. And then your mind, or maybe the left side of your brain, decides to latch onto that and try and repeat that. And that's what it's aiming for now, rather than being open to the next new thing. So that's the kind of mistake I made with it early on. As far as the guy only been like 2 months in, I don't think I think that's pretty good actually, that he's maintaining that for 2 months and building up slowly, because Hyatt and others talk about not rushing, not going too fast into it. And I was a rusher. I jumped into it looking for the strongest version,
the ultimate high. Yeah,
and I had many side effects from this, which I'll maybe talk about in another one. But like one serious one that took me a long time to sort. I mean, it was good in the long run. I'll just say it. I ended up having a seizure at one point, and it's not directly related to this work, but I'd been doing this work a lot, and then a few months later, then I stopped it. I wasn't doing it, and then a few months later, I had a seizure, and I'd never had one before. So and I'd had the buzzing in the spine and all that stuff. So that, to me, I've read about people having problems like that doing Kundalini yogas and stuff like that. Westerners trying these things. So that was me going gung ho too hard, too fast. So I think the guy taking it slowly is probably better, more sensible, and the main advice at that stage, which is impossible to follow, is don't keep chasing, try to repeat the same good feelings. Just do the work and let what happens happen. But you'll find yourself not thinking you're letting what happen, but really you're not. You have a mental image or a concept of the way it is to be, and you're trying to squeeze it into that. And then when things do happen, you try and squeeze them into whatever symbolic framework you prefer. I jumped around from different traditions, different styles. You can fit them into everything. If you're reading enough about a certain thing, or you're thinking enough about it, or writing about it, you can squeeze any of these experiences into almost any of these ones. But some work better for different people. So Hyatt was talking, and he talks in an interview that there's certain symbolic systems he prefers over others, and it'll be different for everybody. But the problem is then you start trying to make the experiences fit the symbols, which they don't really necessarily fit all the time, each time. So all of this takes you in the opposite direction of what the work is doing at the beginning, which is bringing the mind-body stuff closer together. Once you get into it like that, the temptation then is to you create more mind-body split by you go off into all the symbols and you try to figure it all out rather than just dealing with the experiences directly.
Yeah. Did you get shaking a lot? So I'm just recalling that memory. So I shook uncontrollably. And I do know that a lot of Westerners who have trouble with Kundalini experiences, they do sometimes get the shakes and they can't get rid of it.
Well, I mean, that's it's a
heard
seizure
that.
is just a big shake almost. It's like
Yeah, that's true.
it's like it's an extreme version of that. And there's like various circumstances at the time. I've been working in a hard manual job at that time, outdoors, and so I was like tired and done a lot of physical exercise over a while, in kind of dangerous circumstances. It's like on the cages. It's like fish farming cages, off the coast, or rough seas in Scotland. And so I'd been doing that, and then I went away for a weekend and was like drinking and hardly up all night and hadn't really slept much and stuff like that. So, and then that happened. Then I was like, I'd just been in the British Museum and I was visiting all the cool historical stuff. So I was in that kind of frame of mind, And then it happened on the street on the way home, and woke up in hospital and stuff, face smashed up and that. And like, what the hell just happened? It took me ages before I even linked it to the work, because I hadn't been doing it immediately prior. So what basically all the shaking stuff, the energies, it's like that thing where you're better not to start and stop, or you're better not to start and only do it halfway. Once you've started, you're past the point of no return. You have to keep going.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it was just, I let it all settle down and I ignored it, and I moved on to the next thing, and then it caught up with me a couple months later. This is like Hyatt warns against this kind of thing in his first course, in the first DVD course. So it's not like this shouldn't happen if you're doing it slowly by the book, like the guys do.
Yeah, that's true.
Or John Willis says as well.
Yeah, he does. He really says that, doesn't he? I fortunately, so I have a similar tendency. So I tend to just go hell for leather, and then kind of leave something. But with this kind of thing, I was like, I've got a kind of laziness about me. So I always find it difficult to do everything, like something once a day or several times a day. So I actually found the 2 or 3 times a week better for my character. So I never got any super intense side effects just because of my inherent laziness, I think. Although there were periods where I pushed it. As I've spoken about the experience just now, and of course the one in China in our previous conversation. A couple of things I would just add quickly. Don't neglect the mental side of the exercises. I'm pretty sure in that book he gives you a list of behavioral things you should do, and I think the real power probably comes when you combine the two things. So the body work is good, but also think about the other stuff that he mentions in that book and his other books, like the Black Book series, or whatever else he's got out there, because that is, in a way, I mean, it's kind of the point. Is creating behavioral change, and those self ratings and all the other different stuff he's got in there is important to that end. And the other thing is, so since I've got into Buddhism and Zazen in particular, Hyatt talks a lot about in his work about the so-called Maha Satipatthana meditation, or the Maha meditation, which is really just a form of Buddhist meditation, or Vipassana meditation, how you just notice what's going on in your body and you note the sensations verbally. You're meant to do this at the end of your sessions, and I probably didn't do that enough looking back. I was quite lazy, so I just wanted to do the actual exercises, the kind of sexy stuff. But the ability to sit there and note what's going on in your body is very important, and it demonstrates also to you. A lot of people, when they do this work, they can't actually stand sitting there and being with themselves, like actually experiencing the sensations that are going on in their body. And that's kind of the thing you got to work through. It's really important. And in a way, the body work, what it's doing is it's bringing up all this shit into your conscious purview, so that it's critical to be able to sit there and sense and feel and to describe what's going on in your body. It's really important. And in many ways, it forms the entire basis of Eastern or Buddhist meditation practice also, because that's essentially what you're doing. You're doing the same thing. You're noticing what's going on. So don't neglect that either. Make sure you do. Really, that should form more of what you do each session.
Yeah, and that's also important for preventing the problem I said earlier about getting caught up in chasing specific feelings and sensations. You know, like what you think the right thing should be, or a good, you had this really good experience, you're trying to make it happen again. Is if you're doing the sensing, feeling, the scanning thing, where you're just noticing what's sensations and feelings and whatever thoughts as they arise, like Vipassana style, you are detaching from them, so you're not jumping into them and chasing them and trying to create something. So that's kind of like a protection against the problem I said earlier. Although it doesn't, you'll still find yourself doing that. You know, anyone who's done any kind of those type of it's like the Burmese style meditation, Buddhist meditation, is you find yourself getting pulled off into things. This is part of the point of it. So yeah, and it's like you said earlier about the don't neglect the mental stuff. Yeah, you have to think of it as you're working on yourself from the top down as well as the bottom up, and you have to do both at the same time. And this kind of work, like Hyatt's work, and there's other similar things that, like we're doing or now, or some other people doing, is working in between. It's something that's in between those two things, the top down and bottom up. So like the body work will bring up concepts and ideas and thoughts and feelings that you have that were kind of rigid and fixed in place that you didn't even realize you had them. This kind of structure, mental, emotional structure you had. You know, a large part of that's genetic and biological, you can't do anything about it, but a large part of it isn't. It's invented and created by you in your life. It will bring up those things, but if you're not thinking about things and using your mind, a lot of that's useless, because you'll just end up you'll just be controlled by those lower sensations and feelings and things. So you have to, they bring up the concepts and stuff, but you'll also notice if you're trying to change your concepts about yourself, or you're trying to change your ideas, or you have all these big plans about yourself, how are you going to change, there's all these self-development plans and goals for life and stuff, and then you just can't get yourself to do them because your body won't do what your mind is wanting it to do. You just drift and you do other things. So you're still being, that's because you're being controlled by all those physical, emotional structures that you have. A lot of them are just habits. So you need to be, when you bring up all the energies and you release all the tensions and you become more free, you need to be thinking and using your mind and being ultra logical and rational about things, training yourself in that way at the same time, so that you don't, so that you can shape those energies and use them for your benefit. Because otherwise you'll just be like a passive person having all these crazy experiences and you won't do anything in your life. You'll be the guy in the cave that we always talk about, the guy in his underwear at the side of the road.
Yeah, that's true. You don't want to end up a Dharma bum, as they say, and that's a one-way ticket to ending up that way. I think that's it.
I mean, a lot of people get into this stuff just chasing pleasure. I mean, that's what they're there for. So I mean, the guy who you put the question doesn't sound like that at all. He sounds like he's doing the work, and he's, I'm assuming when he says he's getting results, what he means is the kind of things that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Things are happening, he's experiencing things that didn't happen before. Maybe by getting results, he means he's behaving differently in social situations, which is part of it. When you start releasing the tensions, things break up and stuff. But the conscious, reasoning, rational person, has to be shaping and the energies and stuff, because otherwise you'll just create different problems. This is a mistake I made, is try to get it all to. You try to get this like fireworks happening by itself. You don't need to think about it anymore. It's almost a kind of nihilism, actually. You're trying to give up responsibility for your life and let all these energy stuff do it for you. But you can't escape that stuff. You have to do both. It's the top down and bottom up at the same time. And work like Hyatt's is the bridge between those, and the bridge between mind and body. That's the way to look at it. For any person, at different times of your life, you're going to be more in the mind, birds in your head side of it, or more in the physical experience of sensation side of it. But both are obviously operative all the time. But some people need to get more one than the other. I mean, I needed to get more in my body, but some people need to get out of their body and into their head more, think more, because they're just controlled by the sensations and emotions and think they're free. You see these people that think they're free and spontaneous and stuff, and their movements and stuff, and they're trying to act free, but they're very rigid. Yeah. They're going against the structure of their organism. They're like the skeletal postural structure. They're going against that to make themselves appear free and spontaneous, but actually it's a kind of deformed rigidity.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a different point.
I wouldn't know about that because since doing your course, my posture is impeccable. So I recommend everyone out there try it. Yeah, it works.
Buy it now.
But yeah, just on that note, I think they call it Superman syndrome. So it's like this idea that, yeah, you just want to do everything at once. You just want to fucking rise on the planes really quickly and just get all this energy flowing. And I've just got to do everything 15 times a day. And like, you know, just go easy on yourself and kind of enjoy the process, I think. You know, it's funny. I was just thinking, what did I really notice when I first started doing these exercises? The first impression was like I'd been in situations and I would describe myself as highly reactive and fairly quickly into this work. I remember some very vivid experiences where there was a situation where I would normally react in a certain way. And I remember it didn't impact me. The situation externally happened. And I just remember I had like no reaction come up or a slightly different reaction, or I don't know how you'd say it. Maybe an ability to just observe something, whereas before I would just really go for it. And it was quite a vivid experience to the point where I can remember it today. And I remember at the time being very surprised, almost like taken aback. It's like, hang on. It's kind of like this weird feeling. And I started getting a lot of things like that, like little momentary realizations and just these kind of changes where, yeah, something that I would react in a certain way before just kind of dropped. That's how I would describe it. And that's quite surprising, depending on how reactive you are. I was quite reactive.
Yeah, because the set of tension patterns you have are locking in certain behaviors. So in a certain situation, it just triggers a behavior on autopilot, you know, like the robot. This is just being a robot instead of being conscious, you know, just stuff just happens to you. You've kind of it's almost like a reflex based on certain situations. And then if you start doing work like this or other work and you break up the patterns, there's going to be situations where that reflex doesn't happen anymore and something else happens, or more likely what you said is you just suddenly are aware of, oh, normally that would annoy me, I'm not bothered now.
Yeah.
Like for me, I noticed one time I was speaking to someone and like it was I was at some course in a public place and somebody came to the door and I was dealing with the person who arrived at the door, like a delivery guy or something like that. And it was just that kind of awkward situation, like what used to be an awkward situation with the stranger, and he was trying to figure out where to go and whatever. And I remember him, he wasn't a delivery guy, maybe somebody else. But anyway, as they were talking to me, I was looking at them thinking, this person's kind of squirming and all tense. Why are they all tense and nervous and squirming as they're speaking to me? And then I realized, they're just nervous in the social situation. And I thought to myself, interesting, I'm not. And I thought, holy shit, that's just why we used to be like. I was so stuck in that squirming, awkward, tense feeling when you're in social situations. You weren't even aware of what was going on. Yeah. You're just like tighten up like a ball and you're just reacting to whatever happens to you. You're just, you're like no freedom at all. I don't know, you're just like a clock, you know, you're just wound up and then it'll just wind down in a predictable way until you do something to break up these things. So if our guy who's commenting is meaning these type of things are happening, then that's a sign, that's a good sign. That is results. If by results he just means you got a pleasant feeling, that may or may not be good, it depends.
Yeah.
It may or may not be progress. That's what I mean. I mean, it'd be good in the moment. It feels nice, but sometimes things feel nice, but it doesn't do anything. Nothing changes, you know.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I find it came to me in waves. Like you would feel as if nothing was happening for a very long time, and then you have a breakthrough, or maybe the experiences that I was just describing come in clusters, I guess I describe it as. But again, I don't know if my memory is tricking me, because it's funny, the narratives we tell ourselves. Sometimes it's hard to really nail it down. But yeah,
One
I
of
think
the best things.
Yep. Okay, you go. Sorry.
Just one of the things
Sure.
is just doing that early exercises in Hyatt. I remember now is just realizing you're really coming to terms with the fact that you're a biological creature, an animal on a planet. You know, not just an animal on a planet. There's humans are something else included, but are definitely animals as well. And you, until that point, you don't really, that intellectually, you understand, you've read it, heard about evolution, blah blah blah, or whatever. You don't really believe it. You don't feel it as true. You kind of think, because you're just lost in your head and words, and you're thinking all these things. You kind of think of yourself as not really one, especially when you're young, especially when you're in your 20s. You don't think you think you're immortal, and unless something bad happens to you, you just think you're immortal. And you don't think about these things, and first, it's kind of a fear thing, because you don't want to feel like you're a vulnerable animal, which you are in many ways, and by doing the work, I sort of became aware of that, and came to be able to deal with that, and then realize, okay, so I have certain these flaws and these weaknesses that I have to work on. So you actually become less vulnerable. I mean, like in the physical survival sense, by doing a work like this, because then you see yourself more clearly of what you really are, not what you think you are in your words in your head.
Yeah, true. And I think it's a good point. And it's probably why this work, doing it properly when you're young, which is super hard, is a good thing, because you will get most benefit from it when you're young, because the options that open up to you can use more easily because you got more time. Not to say it's ever a complete waste of time if it makes you happier and more well adjusted and less reactive. Those are all good things.
But it's also your brain and your body. The more you're just repeating the same habits, you're just drilling them down and digging the ditch deeper and deeper, and making it harder to change. Although one benefit of being older is you understand more about the world, and you realize how important it is, so you can actually get yourself to do the work that you need to do when you're older. That's in a way, because you now know that things don't work, and having a bigger biceps really didn't actually change that much in your life, or reading the 100 books didn't actually do anything to the rest of your life, and then so these things as you get older, so you take things more seriously, so there's that benefit.
Yeah, you can definitely deepen it. That's for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I was a dickhead. Seriously, like, I think back and I'm like, shit. No wonder I didn't fully grasp it for a long time. But who knows? Maybe there's a special type out there that, is young, he's going to get it all. He's got discipline. I'm sure he's out there somewhere. Okay, I guess we'll do the second one, which is a bit of a long question. I don't know if we're even going to get to the MP3. Anyway, the question I've always had about Hyatt, and maybe you can address this, is how someone can do all these occult spiritual practices, bioenergetics, Zen, meditation, etc., and still be so wrapped up in the ego. I myself have done all of those same things, and it's to the point where on some level, I'm very aware that we are all one, all connected, part of one. The contempt Hyatt has for the common man strikes me as odd, I guess because I've done so much work to see through the ego. And I've had so many experiences validating our interconnectedness. I can't take seriously Hyatt's overwhelming cynicism and contempt. Hyatt himself says he's experienced these things. He talks about LSD trip where he could see tarot cards and someone else, he could see the tarot cards that someone else in another room was looking at. I don't understand how you can come down from that and then write so much material that is clearly rooted in a sense of separateness from those around you. He reminds me of Max Stirner sometimes. I like Max Stirner. I'm pretty sure Hyatt did as well. I think I've heard him mention it
He did,
once.
yes. He did. He recommended him once to people, yeah.
So what do you think of that? Interesting one?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things going on. One is, yes, it's unusual for someone who's advanced in spiritual practices and that kind of world to be negative about people in general. We're used to them being kind of lovey-dovey, airy-fairy kind of people, at least publicly. We're used to them saying nice things about people, and everyone, focusing on love and oneness and all those kind of things. So it's unusual, at least in the Westerner's perception of a spiritual person, to say negative things. Although there is a tradition of that, there are traditions of the guy who kind of says the crazy wisdom kind of person, or they're kind of rogue guru kind of type that break all the social conventions and say all the wrong things and that kind of thing, and that's their method that they use for people. Hyatt had a bit of that, I think. He said, what was the middle part about that comment again?
It's impossible.
the contempt. Here we go. So I myself have done all these things, and it's to the point where some level I'm very much aware that we are all one. We are all connected. The contempt Hyatt has for the common man.
Separateness. So, like, how can you be talking about things being separate and stuff?
Yeah, the ego and etc.
Yeah, well, well, I mean, what am I thinking right now? You don't know. So there's a level of separateness. There's a type of separateness. That's not to say that things aren't interconnected and you can't separate things, because it's also things are inseparable. But there's also some kind of level of separateness, or there would be nothing. It would just be one thing, which would be nothing. Do you know what I mean? We get mystical, but so to think that to have like any kind of realizations that you would just constantly be going around in a state of oneness and nothing be separate, well, you wouldn't be able to eat food because do you know what I mean? So that's a different thing from the experience of doing the meditations, and then you're experiencing everything is just one, and the subject object separation breaks down and stuff. So there's still, even if everything is one thing, the one thing is seeing itself from different angles. You know, each person has their own stream of experiences, so there is a separation by definition. There has to be. It's just not the separation that people think there is before they do any of the work. So, which I think what the guy's getting at. So, how can he be so divisive? I think that's what he's saying as well. Is how can he be so negative about other people and divide them between basically the smart, good ones and the idiots? To be more like how Hyatt would maybe say it. That's not how spiritual teachers talk normally. Yeah, so I think it's almost like surprise that it's someone being like that. But I also think how, in a personal level, just enjoyed winding people up like that. People who thought everything, the love all is one crowd, he just liked winding them up. He enjoyed that. So the question would be, why would he enjoy that if he was so advanced? Well, why not?
Yeah. You know, there's a certain rascality about all these teachers, right? They're not just like walking around like with a fucking halo around their head. A lot of them behave badly. I think we've spoken about that before. It's not like just
For definite, yeah. I mean, you can't, like, the spiritual insight doesn't correlate exactly with moral improvement in a person. Not necessarily. There are some things you stop doing certain things, but I think that's a modern Western misunderstanding, or the way that the Eastern teachers who arrived were seen as or presented as, you know, that kind of like a transcendent person who's out of life and stuff. But I mean, the closest you can get to that is being the guy who's in the cave and doesn't leave the cave. I mean, the person is going to be a real person, and they're going to be whatever kind of awakenings or whatever they had are going to be on top of this biological organism that's on a planet. So with its own emotions and own habits and own preferences, and why could somebody not see things clearly for what they are and also be a dick socially? Do you know what I mean? It's like there's no reason why the two things would have to go together. I mean, why is seeing things clearly mean the person will do good things for the other people? I think in general they're more likely to, but that's not even a moral thing. It's more just structural. The game works better that way, because if you're just doing things nice, things will be nicer to you. It's just like overall. But at the end of the day, samurai was maybe quite advanced in Zen and was easily killing someone. So, like, I don't think Hyatt's killing people by saying that people are being quite negative about people.
Yeah.
You know? So
yeah, totally. I also think that
you can deny people are.
You go.
I'm just saying people can deny they can deny somebody's advancement or whatever. That's like one approach to this problem, but I don't think it solves it, because I just don't think the two things necessarily go together. You can be a dick and see things clearly, or you can be a really nice person and really good person and have no spiritual awareness at all.
Yeah, it's funny
other than the fact that you do that. So I mean, are they the same? Maybe the same rate, maybe not. I don't know. But by seeing people, then I don't see the strict correlation between the two.
No, it is. there's a lot of assumptions made about spirituality, because in spirit, I hate that word, by the way. I hate it for
Same.
this reason.
I use it
reason.
all the time.
Yeah, there's no other word, is there, really? So I use it too. But I think there's an assumption that the moral system that is inherent in the religion goes along with the awakening experience, which in the format of a religion it does. But you have to understand, like, Dr. Hyatt wasn't particularly bound to any one religion. He was like a chameleon. He did all sorts of things. But he was massively influenced by Nietzsche, of course, who has a completely different conception, right? So he was going around having these experiences, but he wasn't doing it through some hippy-dippy Hindu frame or, with a moral system of sweetness and light. He was doing it from a perspective of someone who cared about power, and he was aware of that, and he made that very explicit that that's what he cared about. Because I think that, for me, and I could be wrong, but when someone says to me that we are all one, we're all connected, the moral assumption you derive from that experience is not necessarily like there's no morality inside of that experience. That's just an experience. There's no moral structure you can you could do it, but you don't have to do it. You don't have to. It's just an experience. It's just a realization that there isn't separateness, as Kevin was describing. So there's not separateness, but there is kind of separateness, because we're all having our own part of this greater inseparable whole. But yeah, Hyatt's influences were not hippy-dippy monkey face gurus, which, I think even him and Regardie were constantly taking the piss out of people like that kind of, those people that derive those strong sweetness and light type moral principles from these experiences and outlooks. So not only was his philosophical starting point completely different, so his Nietzschean outlook and Sternian is probably Sternerian, I don't know how you'd say that, but he also had a scientific background, which people forget. So he was a psychotherapist, he was a psychologist, and he looked at the world that way pretty clearly. So he was looking at people as in terms of bundles of behaviors, and he was working with people, and he knew people, I would imagine. And I would imagine after working with people and knowing people that you would start to get the shits with people, particularly if you're subscribing to something like Friedrich Nietzsche, where the whole thing is about man as something to be overcome. And that's rife throughout his philosophy. There's nothing Eastern. There's no moral Eastern bits that Hyatt's taking away from this stuff. And the way that he's using these yogas, special yogas or special exercises, it's not really necessarily even in a spiritual way. Like when you read his books, he's using it as a way to change character and behavior, which is quite a scientific proposition. Not to say he was against spiritual experiences. I think he was obviously into that because he wrote books about it and stuff. But for sure, he rejected the Eastern derivation of morality from these transcendent awakenings, which is not to say that I don't think he was going around like chopping people up and fucking like all this really fucked up shit. As you were saying, Kevin, I think he liked fucking stirring people up, which I like doing too. So I totally get that. I love doing that to people. And a lot of the time I would imagine that he was doing that to expose parts of people to themselves, maybe. I know that's why I kind of do it. So I guess there's a few things there. So he's coming from a place that's not mystical, a mystical Eastern system of morals that are derived from awakening experiences. And in the East, they write about these things in a very particular way, particularly in Hinduism. It's very flowery and very like just a bit icky, you know? I don't know how you feel about that, Kevin, but I feel it's a bit icky. Like I don't like it. It's like you guys are taking all these morals and you're trying to superimpose them on a world that's way grayer than what you're trying to say that it is. And that can almost become a crutch in and of itself. Like, you can go around thinking, like, potentially the thought that we're all interconnected is just a thought. Potentially. It may not even, there may have been an experience that when you come out and say we're all interconnected, we're all one, this guy's got ego, I got no ego, like, in and of itself, that's still an egotistical statement. It's not without ego to go around saying things like that. It's quite egotistical. So I think Hyatt, you know, is a complex character, and I think that he saw these contradictions in us as an animal, because that was his epistemological starting point, was as a psychologist, not as a hippie in India. It was completely different. He looked at the animal in a completely different way, in a biological way, which is similar to the way that we look at it. So I think, yeah, there's a couple of things in there. I don't think you can derive moral conclusions necessarily from these, you know, so-called awakening experiences or changes in behavior. Like, these are peak experiences that, you know, they're fine, they're good. That I don't even think Hyatt was necessarily just about that. He was about a whole lot of other things as well. I mean, and as you were saying, Kevin, this kind of thing leads you to go and sit in a cave and just do nothing, which Hyatt was a Nietzschean, and that he probably would have despised that outlook. Clearly he did. I don't know him, but I would imagine he didn't like it. And you can see that in all his books, particularly his later books, that they're about self-overcoming, transcendence of the self, all these Nietzschean themes. And what he'd done is he's taken stuff from the East and he's using it to achieve these aims. Like, he's the laboratory, that's the technology. I reject the moral part, I reject the Eastern morality, and I'm taking this technology, which as a psychologist, I see it as a method of brain change, and, you know, with bits of transcendence and nice experiences, fine. And I'm using that to overcome myself. But in this, I also recognize the limitations of what it means to be human, a biological being. And one of my favorite quotes from him is, just because I forget the unconscious doesn't mean it's going to forget me, which is why you see all these Eastern practitioners going around preaching, we're all one, we're all connected and all this stuff. And then they're fucking the Sangha. It's because you are a biological being. There's no getting away from these drives. And I think he was very honest about that when other people aren't. I think that's one of his biggest strengths, to be honest. So that's my breakdown of it. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
It's just the thing about the viewing everybody as one, and you know, being against the separation. Once you've done all the practices, you start to see everything as one. That's associated with the kind of like first initial stage of any kind of awakening path or whatever, is that kind of, you're going from the separateness of yourself and stuck in your head or whatever, or the, you know, ego or however people want to call it, false ego or whatever terminology they use. And then you have some kind of awakening experience where you see the interconnectedness and everything's one and things like that. But that's not the end of it. That's kind of, those are like the people you see on YouTube who've had a like non-dual awakening or whatever. They're doing the kind of Vedanta stuff or whatever it is, or Vipassana or whatever it is they've been doing, and they're like, their eyes are wide open and everything, we're all just one man, there's no separation. They just sound ridiculous. You know, it's like everyone should love each other the same, everyone's equal, everything's the same. That's an experience you'll have of seeing it like that. Every sensation and things just coming in, it's all just, what's the difference? It's all just one thing happening. Sensation of you, sensation of it, it's just all one. On that level, it is all one. It's just one thing happening. That doesn't, it's not separate. But I mean, are you really saying that you are going to prefer other people to your own family and loved ones? You know, like, are you really saying that that's true for you? But it isn't true for you because you're a human as well. So like you're bound to have preferences, and if you have preferences, it's entail separation. So like, you know, like it's all I know is when I first got into the stuff, I remember that stage where you're like everything's one, and like you become quite passive if you stay in that. But eventually, you start realizing it's more complicated than that. There's kind of you're the lesser in this greater thing that's happening. Your understanding of what you were in your relationship to was wrong before. You have a bigger understanding now, but then you'll end up transcending that understanding to another one, and then that one to another one. Where the end is, I don't know. But it's more complex. It's more mysterious than simply it's all just one. Because in one sense, it isn't. You know, it's like, how could there be anything if it was all just one? And anyway, and even just from a sort of logical point of view, if everything's interconnected in one, why does that mean that you should have the same opinion of every single thing? Think everything is equal. Everything is equally important in the sense for you in your life. Well, things are going to be better or worse for you. You know, there's that level of it. There's another level of it, you know, which would be like the God's eye view, where everything's just equal. Everything's just one, you know, it's just whatever. So you can have that experience by doing the meditation or whatever, but you can't live in that, because that's not the only thing that's happening. There's like layers, or I don't know, it's just more complex.
Yeah, I think just quickly on that, maybe the way to put it is, so we're talking about this split brain stuff. So yourself has evolved. You know, we all have one. We all have, or at least we have the sense of one. And even with these experiences, that doesn't go away. So this feeling of separateness kind of goes away, but the sense, I don't think, it doesn't really go away. It's useful. You need it, because as Kevin's saying, you've got to live. You can't just turn into a mollusk and sit there and absorb everything. I don't know. That's my feeling on it. Yeah, I could be wrong. Maybe that is what happens. But you know, the other thing is that there's in Eastern religion. So I'll just quickly comment on a few things implicit in this statement. So from a Zen perspective, if you were to go up to a master and tell him everything is interconnected, like, I know everything is interconnected, we are all one, he's going to tell you to fuck off and keep sitting, like, because it's just another thing. It's just another thought. So there's an element that even within the Eastern system, no master is going to let you indulge in something like that, because then you're still missing the point. That's not the experience. That's a statement. And it's it's also a moral statement, because it's implying something moral. Everything's one, as opposed to everything selfishly not being one. But again, this is it's just a set of sounds, a set of words. And that in and of itself is dangerous, because you're probably missing the opportunity to actually have, quote unquote, you know, a spiritual experience. And there's also this thing implicit in particularly Indian mysticism, I think, of this ego death. Like, you hear it all the time, like, people, I'm going to kill my ego, and, you know, I'm going to blow it apart. And just, you know, I can't think of a more egotistical statement than that, because, you know, it's on another level. But whatever this ego or id or character or self is, I don't think it really ever goes away. What does happen is it gets recontextualized and made a part of a crowd of different things, whereas before it was ruling everything. But it doesn't just disappear. You're always going to have an ego. You're always going to need to drink and eat. As Kevin says, you're going to go and see your family, and you're going to like your grandma more than some vagrant on the street. And I don't know, maybe there are some masters who are so fully cooked that their brain doesn't work in that way, but I would suggest that it's not going to be us, probably. And, you know, the indulgence in statements like this will get in the way of your progress, even on an Eastern path. going to get in the way. It's just a statement, and it's.
I mean, what the guy said in
missing
the
the
comment.
point.
I mean, it's a great question. You know, it's like
It is a good. Yeah, I don't want to
you
seem
know,
dismissive, but it is still.
because
It's
he's
a
put it in a
statement, right?
strong way. So we're just
Yeah.
saying it. We're
Yeah.
like unfolding it the other way, obviously. But I mean, what he's saying is like it's an issue. It needs addressed because, I mean, why is that? It does seem strange, but I think it just seems strange because of a lot of the assumptions that we have and what all this stuff means. It's not actually there, and even some of the Eastern stuff, they don't think all this. You know, I mean, even
they
you're
don't.
talking about Hinduism, but there's lots of the weird tantra sects in Hinduism that are very different and much more, you would say, like negative and about separation and stuff like that.
Yeah. And advice of
kind of the
Vedanta
methods they use.
Yeah, less flowery. And even as I was saying, you know, Zen itself would never tolerate such a statement because it's not what you're trying to tap into. But I do think, yeah, as you say, it is a reasonable question. But I do think where he was coming from was not particularly spiritual in a way.
I mean, he's also reacting to the interview that we're playing clips of. So like Hyatt is pretty strong. He has pretty strong opinions in that. And also it's a different time. So that's like the guy, I mean, if you're writing that question now, you're living in internet culture war world. So you're thinking things, you're thinking things in a different way than people did then, because I was saying this in like early 2000s. And it was, he's kind of reacting against the kind of thoughtless culture that's happening at that time. You know, like no one's really thinking about these things. So he's been kind of extreme sounding because he's reacting against the kind of complacency of everybody. Whereas now more people are thinking about these things, and it's more common to see that people are, you know, go in tribes and the whole tribes believe one thing and then switch to another thing. And that, you know, everyone's seeing that in their daily and believing weird things. Everyone's seen that in their daily life now. Whereas before, he's like kind of talking about it as a sort of diagnosis of a animal's behavior that's wrong or that's unhelpful, and that some of them can improve themselves, but not all of them can because they're animals.
But you know, that's a difference, right? So his epistemological starting point is different to a spiritual person. So he's looking at it more like a psychologist, like he's looking at people as having pathologies and all these different things. So in that regard, I would imagine it'd be easy to just notice how out of control most people are. And then the obvious conclusion you're going to draw is, well, in terms of what I'm trying to achieve, they're pretty much useless. Pretty much. I mean, that's an honest conclusion, right? Do you think?
He's unabashedly an elitist as well. You know, he's like, he calls himself an elitist. So like, that's what the guy is picking up on. So I mean, he is. He's not. He doesn't hide it. So that's just a preference in the same way as somebody's preference would be to not have that. The opposite of that.
So he's Nietzschean, right?
Just
he's Nietzschean. Yeah. You know the book.
I think so. Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
I mean,
has his point of view.
Yeah, and you know, it's so I think what's hard for people to put together is the idea of how. Okay, so a Nietzschean is an elitist. It's about power. It's about domination, warfare, superiority, all these different things. Then you have the spiritual exercises, which is, I guess, what this gentleman is saying. So bioenergetic Zen meditation. So how do these two things come together? So you don't have a particularly spiritual outlook. I think where it comes from is if you're a Nietzschean, at some level, you're acknowledging hierarchy. You are acknowledging good and bad, or people who are good at something, people that are terrible at something, beautiful and ugly, all the various dichotomies that someone like Nietzsche would talk about. So I think maybe the difficulty is coming of, so if you sit there in meditation and you have an awakening experience, or you're doing these bioenergetic exercises and you're losing tension and all the different things that are going on, then how do you embrace something like Nietzscheanism, which, as you say, it's a good question. It is a good question. But I think that that's where he was coming from. He was coming from the perspective of a psychotherapist, and he was using these techniques, which have impacts on the way that we behave and the ability to rewire ourselves and reorient ourselves. And in that sense, self-overcome, which is what Nietzsche was talking about, essentially, was self-overcoming. And he used these things as a kind of technology to achieve the aims of elitism, to make it more accessible, or to try and generate more individuals who would be elite, to try and get the work out there to achieve those aims. But he was, I as far as I can glean from his writings, he was concerned, about those aims, as you were saying, Kevin, about elitism, about power, about overcoming the what he would say is a rather sorry state of man, which is very true. I mean, you just have to look around you, right? Of course it is.
Also,
it's
when he says
mental.
elitist, he's not talking about the elites like everyone talks about now. He doesn't mean them, that they're the best. He means that certain individuals, and they could be from any area, a part of life. I mean, even in that last episode, the clips we're playing, he's talking about, you get these people at the lower end or the higher end. It's often in the middle of society that you don't get these type of people, for whatever reason. So when he says this, it's just about the self-overcoming Nietzschean thing is the best way to understand where he's coming from, for definite. Nietzsche himself, it's clear he's had in a way some type of what we'd call what people call awakening or enlightenment experience. It's clear, like when in his writing, his understanding of subject-object. In some of the later books is obvious he has, and it's just like the whole Zarathustra book is clearly to me, it just sounds like a Kundalini experience verbalized sometimes.
No, for sure.
And so I mean, it's clear he's had these things, and he still thought what he thought. So, you get the same type of person who's a monk, Christian monk in a monastery in the Middle Ages, would interpret the same kind of experiences in a very different way.
Yeah, according to a moral.
The interaction between the concepts they were using, they would have the interplay between the physical experiences and the moral concepts, and then they'll try and shape them into the symbol structure that they're using, and you have a moral set of opinions or ways that stand in that tradition or beliefs, and they are going to be different places. And part of the doing the work, like Hyatt's work, is you break up the rigidity of these things, but you might not. It might cause problems for you in your life, because you're going to, if your life is organized in such a way where you, like if you did live in a monastery and you start having these experiences, it breaks up a lot of that emotional structures that you had that are kind of rigidly in place. You can't really do much about it. You have to kind of figure out a way to go along with the society around you, which is thinking differently from you, which is separate from you. So this is the kind of people have been dealing with these things forever, I think. Different groups of people doing it in different ways, and then some of them grow big into religion, some of them don't. Some of them are dead ends, some of them go for thousands of years. I think it's much messier and not random. Random's not the right word, but it's much more messy and unpredictable, these things, I think, than some people the traditionalists like to think that it's just there's the one set and it's going through time and it's kind of rigid. I think this is all just fantasy looking back. It's much more messy. Some things could have taken off, other things didn't. People are doing things now that might take off later. We don't know. A lot of things are dead ends, probably. A lot of teachers appear who have insights into things other people don't have, and some of them disappear and no one knows, no one cares about, or just only a few people cared about. I'm sure of that. Some of them become religions, some of them don't.
And the other dichotomy that we should probably talk about is the idea that the awakening experience probably doesn't have a lasting impact on character as such, or at least Hyatt believe that. So again, you're getting this dichotomy, as you were saying, is so you have an experience, and you can conceptualize that with symbols, as you were saying, in many different ways. And the cultures at the time that the realization was had did so in their peculiar lot of symbols and ideas and concepts. So for, I think, I just think that if you look at the animal scientifically, more scientifically, in a materialist way, which is kind of what Hyatt was doing, then you're not going to view it through the prism of religion in any way. You're kind of more looking at it as, okay, well, this is how the brain reacts in this situation. If the body moves in a certain way, does it loosen up a certain behavior? And as you're helping people, which is what he did as a psychotherapist, using body therapy, doing it on yourself, practicing it with Israel Regardie and all these various people, you're going to notice different things about how the human being as an animal can change in certain ways, how maybe in other ways it can't change. But also that when you use these exercises, they also seem to induce awakening experiences. But if you're seeing all that from a scientific point of view, or a point of view of a materialist, where you're looking at cause and effect, I just think you're not going to be wrapped up in the religiosity and the symbols of religion. And I totally agree. The more you look at different religions and how they've interpreted things completely differently, it just really proves the point that the experiences themselves can be really twisted any which way, any way you kind of want to, I think. Having said that, for sure, I think like it's not going to turn you into a full-blown psychopath. Like if you do have these experiences and you're looking at yourself from a certain angle, it's not like you're going to become Hannibal Lecter. And I don't think that Hyatt was pushing that at all.
You're much less likely to do the bad things, because a lot of them are just tension out of control. So you're not going to do the bad things you might have done.
I love what you say, that Hyatt was like a proto edgelord, which is a really important part of him as well, right? Like it is, because the way he put things, it seems quite confronting, but I think that that's a very deliberate tactic and ploy. Because you see all the edgelords on the internet. Like Hyatt was, I think you were saying this is like the first one. he did that in all his
some
books.
Of his aphorisms and that. Yeah, I mean, like there's like really concise aphorisms that are just like, they're good and make you think, but also designed to wind people up. He's like, in Scotland, there's a phrase, he's a wind-up merchant. That's what he does. He likes winding people up. Yeah. So that's part of it. I mean, it's not just that. He's not just that, but he's that kind of what did you call it? Rascal guru kind of thing. Where they're saying things and going against the rules and stuff like that. That's his type. There is the other type, who's the loving type, the nurturing type, and people come to them for wisdom, and the nice man with the grey beard, and they feel warm around him. That's another type. There's just different types. So to go back to the comment, it's forgetting that there are other types of these guys. Some of them don't even deal with people at all. They just disappear into the woods or the mountain or the cave or whatever. That's another type. Some of them are probably living apparently normal lives, doing real things, and not even talking about the stuff like this. They're doing things that's having the effects that they want in some kind of normal, physical, technological way or whatever. That's equally could be possible. So I think that's all it is he is the type that we're not used to seeing. We're just used to, and also we're just used to seeing when you see a spiritual type of person, they tend to be kind of positive and meek and nice and stuff. Sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a weak way. So we kind of, if you see the opposite of that, then that person can't be interested in spiritual stuff. How is this a dick? How is he still a dick? How do they still hate people and get annoyed by people? I mean, Hyatt has a book called The Yoga of Hate. It's all about how to use your hate as fuel for self-development.
Yeah, good book too. He didn't run away
Amazing.
from stuff. That's what defines him, right? Like he never he's like, oh no, we've got to forget about hate and like all these
That's
very
a Nietzschean,
human
Nietzschean
emotions.
thing.
Yeah,
It's a Nietzschean thing. It's the psychological honesty of like the bad, that people are fueled and run by the bad stuff that we like to hide from ourselves. And instead of pretending, some of those traditions pretend it's not there. Some of them work with it. Some of them, they have like a lot of the moral structures are intended to prevent people acting out in those impulses, whether it's consciously realized that's what they're doing or not. But some people just have and Nietzsche's like this. It's just you just can't look away from the true thing, no matter how horrible it is. And then to use it as fuel, sublimation. You're taking the bad emotions and you're making good things out of them.
Yeah,
you're making yourself better out of them. So that's a lot of his thing. And also it's also for Hyatt, it's marketing. He's being like that, so he gets people who are he repels the wrong type of person who's into that kind of stuff and appeals to another type of person. So like, he's selecting for the type of people who approach him. Remember, guys like this are getting hit by emails and stuff all the time by especially in this field, by some real crazy people constantly. So they're saying things to get rid of those people and to attract another group of people as well. So that's just another level of it. That's not the only thing they're doing. Like if you do that, you have to say things to just for practicalities, for time management.
yeah.
You have to put off the wrong type of people, so you're not dealing with all the really fluffy people.
So kings.
It makes sense that somebody would be more extreme the other way to do that. It's like you can go over the top the other way, which maybe he's doing sometimes as well.
And it would make you contemptuous of people, right? If you're just dealing with fucking crazies constantly, you would be contemptuous. Absolutely.
Bound to. I mean, like in this field, you get the most like people who are just absolutely whacked out. The 10% of people or whatever are serious and doing something with it, and then the rest are just either it's just a crutch or a make them feel nice. It's like a sort of therapy kind of thing, a little therapy hobby on the side, or they're just completely crazy and there's nothing you can do for them. Not like people working in this stuff can't. Somebody can, but not us.
Yeah. It's I think he was, obviously I've worked with one of his students and I've heard stories, and it was, he wasn't a bad guy either. So you'd read his books and you're like, wow, look at this guy. He must be like, must be some evil genius. But he's not actually like that. He was
very warm. Yeah, when I met him, he was very warm, very funny, very like really amazing, nice energy and welcoming and like great to be around. Nothing like his much more abrasive personality in the writing. But I'm sure he could be different to different people. So like this is the point. If especially if someone like him is so psychologically attuned that you would do things different ways for different people. So it's like I definitely also heard him say things really sharp to someone really cutting deep into their personal bullshit that's hurtful to the person, but it's true. This is the point. It's true. It's not like destructiveness for nothing. It's what he's saying is true. What he's saying in the clip about most of the people in the middle of society are just like lost in symbols and that, and a few people at the very bottom, the rough in the streets, and a few people at the very top are maneuvering and making things happen at the top and controlling things that are faceless and we don't know. It's probably true. It's like it's horrible. It's like doesn't sound inclusive of everybody or whatever, but it's true. So what are you gonna do about it?
Yeah, there was his book, The Psychopath's Bible, obviously has like the most edgelord title of all time.
Even the subtitle, even the subtitle.
Yeah, totally. And
or the extreme individual. Even the call says extreme.
Extreme. It's almost kind of cringe, to be honest. I was cringing. At the time.
It is now. It is now. But even then, But I mean, it's market. And he even says in an interview somewhere that's for a certain type of person, that book.
Yeah.
And it's like kind of guy, it's like it's young guys with a certain mentality, and it doesn't mean that you stay in that. That's where, like, it's like a first stage. People also get mixed up with all this in this kind of work where they think everything's true at every stage in time for every person. So certain books are right for you at certain times, and that's the way it is. And then you transcend that and you move on to the next thing. But you have to go through those phases. You can't just jump to the correct phase or what you think is the correct one.
Don't hurt me no more. Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more. What is
stuff like that. That's
Yeah.
just how it works. So I mean, he's got different books. He's got that book that's for one type of person. He's got a book on like Western Tantra, you know, a book on Tantra, which is different, and a CD that goes with that, where it's with a lady. So it's like a very different audience. That book, and it's written in a different way. It's more nice, you know. It's not in the aggressive kind of way. They're for different audiences. Remember, he's a publisher as well, so they're like publishing books for different people. You know, they have a marketing idea of like, this is for these, who each product is for. You know, they wouldn't have been in business if they weren't doing that also. And that speaks to like the flexibility and the chameleon like aspect to him of changing things for different people. So these things shouldn't be surprising, and it shouldn't be surprising that he's like, some people's experience of him as mega nice and friendly, and other people found him horrible and nasty.
Yeah,
he's maybe just saying the truth to everybody.
Yeah. It
you know, I mean,
I was just on that book. It does seem nasty on the outside, but if you really think about it, if you think about it aside from the edgelord aesthetic and, you know, all the other, you know, seemingly nasty stuff that he says in there, there's actually not really anything in it that's encouraging any negativity at all. It's all just full of excellent exercises that you can use to stop being a wanker. So there's nothing negative in it, even though it seems as if like he's worshipping like egotism and like all this kind of evil, non-enlightened stuff. It's not really the case. And even the, I guess you call them aphorisms. It kind of reminds me of, I think it's the book called is Desmond Morris, The Naked Ape. Have you read that before? And this other book,
I know it, but I haven't read it.
It's kind of like it seems negative, but what he's doing is he's just describing what people do. So it's almost like he's saying, well, this is what they're going to do. So if you want to be in business or anything else, I mean, this is just how it works. So if you want to live, I don't think that's an endorsement of it. I mean, I could be wrong on that. I don't think he's endorsing
it's almost
commonness.
Like he's trying to get you to accept that that's what's happening outside, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, and you're
people
probably
are doing things for their own, and you're doing it too. And he's so it's making it conscious for you that, oh, I'm doing this too, but it's also giving you a method for transcending it, so you're not stuck in that. It's not about like 48 laws of power to like use all these tricks against it. It's
being
not like that, even though it might seem like that if somebody first reads it, but it actually isn't. It's you overcome the need for, because the need for those things that people have is like inferiority complex or whatever is driving those things. But if you do the work, you won't have that. So you just be using your understanding of the way people behave. You're just using as a tool now. It's not like an emotional need for you, not a crutch. Yeah. It just becomes useful practically to know what people are going to do. And there seems to be just that aspect of you can't transcend what you're already doing if you don't know what you're already doing.
Yeah. I don't think it's worshipping malevolence. It's more an instruction manual. Like it's, as you say, it's got no like moral backing to it. It's more just a set of observations, I think. So I think the whole thing about him being, this malevolent Machiavellian guy is probably overblown. I mean, I don't know him. I don't really pick it up in his books personally. But these are all, it was a good question. I did have to think about it a bit. And there's a lot in that question actually about how, people see things differently and how awakening experiences can have moralities hanging off them, and where you're coming from and why it matters.
I mean, you might know more about this, but in Buddhism, my understanding is that not in Zen, but one of the other ones that they have, there's like three kind of things you need to train in. Basically, there's the wisdom training, the seeing things as they really are. There's the concentration, training. So it's doing all the meditation things to bring up the nice states and weird experiences, peak experiences, all those things. And then there's the morality, so it's just how to behave in normal life and that. So they're understanding that these things are separate. So the wisdom, they don't just have the wisdom training, do the meditations and you'll behave well. They don't just have that. You have to do the morality stuff as well.
Yeah.
So they know that they're not, that by just seeing things clearly won't make you necessarily a good person. That's built into it. And it's built into like the Western versions of this too. The Christian mystical versions are like this too. They have, there's the different layers to it. They're not, I don't think they're, and I mean, a lot of this kind of seems like censorship about stuff back then to us now, I think was them knowing that if you go too far in some of this stuff without, it can cause bad, it can separate you from being well behaved in their definition of well behaved if you get too far into some of this stuff. So I think even a lot of these things are sort of like safety valves and things, and mechanisms to integrate those three different ways, the three different things you need to develop. The seeing things clearly, the meditation, focus skills, and then the how you behave, and then however the different traditions would explain that. So I mean, it's not us who's saying these things are separate. I mean, we're not really saying anything different. We're just pointing out this is how it all works.
Yeah. We're not Easterners. That's another thing that people underestimate, I think. So I think we're kind of, you comment on it a lot on this. We're different. So that kind of thing. Yeah, I agree. The ethics and the precepts and all those rules, they almost have a practical use. So it's not like they have a thing in themselves necessarily, but it's, as you say, it's something to ground you or to offer you something to hold on to as you go through the process, because it can be quite, it can upend you, it can make you quite neurotic. So you probably do want something to hang on to. But having said that as well, you know, I think we're different. Like we're way more fucked up than probably some dude in a Japanese village 600 years ago, I think. A lot of the people I know are pretty messed up. I mean, I could be wrong about that, Kevin. Maybe in Scottish villages, everyone was okay. I'm not sure. But I feel like what we need something different. Like we need maybe some, I don't know, just a hunch that I've got.
I don't know. Scottish villages fucked up 600 days ago. Never mind 600 years ago. Yeah, I mean, the West is starting from a different place. People are more individualist as well, so that plays into any kind of talk of overcoming the ego is different for a Westerner than an Easterner, because the individualist concept is different in the West, or the modern West anyway. So like you in one sense there's more work to do, and it's harder for people, but in another it's less, because you some of the methods they need to break free of the community mindset in order to have awakenings is not the same. You don't necessarily need in the West, so it's complex, and I don't think there's a strict correlation between progress in any of these things and your behavior and just your general, not even just your moral behavior, but just your general functioning in real life. And you function in real life or not.
Morality is a bit dangerous too, because morality can become a crutch in and of itself. So you can hang on to morality to cope. I see this all the time, like people with all these morals, when the morals are being used to cover up something about the person that they don't like. I see that constantly. And I also see a certain kind of person, you know, talking about the left brain, right brain dichotomy, who may be genuinely religious or very earnestly involved in a path. And they kind of go through the funny stage of being obsessed with the rules and regulations. Like really that becomes the path itself. And it's funny to think about just in a left brain, right brain context, because I would have thought of all the religions, Buddhism would be the one that was trying to get at something a bit more right brain, or at least a balance between the two. And I see people all the time adopt a moral structure as their primary thing. Like it's more about the morals than it is the practice. The two things are not the same. And so morals can get in your way as well. They can be like a crutch. You can use them to cover things up about yourself that you're going to need to face to actually make progress in these paths. I think that you need to be careful of them. And what I see a lot of as well is people accusing others using the morality of the thing that they've adopted. I see that, well, this guy's going to Buddhist hell because he masturbated once or something. And, you know, all these quite ridiculous conversations based on a medieval Indian set of morals, which to me is just the most absurd thing possible. But what is interesting about that to me is I would really like to know where that's coming from in that person. I'd like to know that person, and I guarantee there would be certain things about their character that would be making them do that they're not aware of. And the morals are getting in the way of them understanding that element of themselves, and thus getting in the way perhaps of any true progress in that spiritual path, which is interesting, just relating back to Hyatt, because Hyatt was the kind of guy where he'd say, well, before you go and do the hippy dippy spiritual stuff, it's probably better to get to know yourself first, because if you don't get to know yourself, then these higher levels of spiritual attainment are going to be more difficult to access, because you'll just be going around like a dumb robot behaving badly, basically. So I think you've got to be careful of morals. Like they do serve a purpose, but in the sense that I'm talking about, I see them used in very, very human ways, very unimpressive ways, very regularly. It's just disappointing to me that people focus on that side of things. Like, oh, did he follow the moral rules? Did he do the morality right? Did he wear the right fucking bit of clothes or whatever? I just think that that's the wrong approach, and I think that can get in the way. To be honest, becoming obsessed with that kind of thing.
Yeah,
really get in the way.
After a certain stage, you stop caring about that stuff anyway, because you're already more or less doing the right things.
You would think so. You're
functioning better. You don't need to think about the rules. For a certain type of person, they need that. They need that structure at the start, I think. And some people are really worried about the things they'll do if they don't have an external structure.
They're not going to get prodded with a fucking pitchfork. Yeah.
So yeah, it's
maybe they like that. Maybe they like it. The thought of it. Who knows?
But also, like, even if some of them like it. Yeah, that's why they do it. But even if, like, some of the more, even like proper, some of the Christian mystics at the far end of their practices, they're saying things like they're now beyond morality, but they have to be very careful about how they say this. They don't say it bluntly, but there's like debate at the high end of that where they're saying, like, have you become just like God, or are you saying you are God? And if you're saying you are God, now that's heresy. But if you're saying you become like him, theosis and all these kind of things. They've got to the point where they're like, I can do what I want because I'm aligned with the whole now. So what I'm doing, what I want, is basically what the whole wants. That's a very dangerous thing to say for them. But for in other traditions, obviously they can say that, and or they can think that. I'm not saying it's what's true, what's not. But it's more, you transcend that rule-based kind of morality, and it's more just the Buddhist thing about it's like living skillfully is one way of saying it, and the behavior changes are built into the brain and body changes you've done through doing the practices. Although the old guys wouldn't say it like that probably, but a guy like Hyatt is thinking in terms of brain change.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether brains are the cause of all this thing, but it's definitely there will be brain change if you do the things that are real permanent changes in your consciousness and behavior. There will also be brain change, whichever way around it is, you can debate. So in a way, they're transcending the morality, which is again Nietzsche's thing. That's Nietzsche's exact thing. You're overcoming the moral. You're creating your own values.
Yeah.
I mean, whether you disagree with that or not, but that's his point, and that's where Hyatt's coming from. Yeah. So, like, I mean, part of it, maybe he's part of his game is demonstrating to people that you can be beyond these things and say what you want, and you don't need to be restricted by these things.
Yeah. He was Nietzschean, wasn't he? Clearly, that was his starting point.
I mean, people also say, but Nietzsche was a very friendly, nice person. He wasn't bad to people. He wasn't a nasty person. He was friendly and probably good at dancing and that kind of, like it's
quite cheerful. Yeah.
So it's not like it's hard to put these things together.
Because there's subtlety to people. Like at every moment, you're encountering something different. There's no way to just say this is what that person was. I don't think. I think that's, you're always facing something different. In a way, there's no consistency to human character. It's far more complex than that. And it's the place of the moralist, of the lowest kind of the moralist, or what people call moral fags online, to just get a book, read some rules, and just go, there you go. Nietzsche was a very, very naughty man. See, it says so in my book. He was extremely naughty, and no one should read what Nietzsche said. The other day, I came across someone criticizing Max Stirner. Again, on moral lines. Like I've got my little book of fucking morals here. Therefore, this guy is a bad person. Like he is objectively has an essence of naughty badness, and you shouldn't touch him. It's that kind of morality that is like that's unpalatable, I think, to anyone like Hyatt and Nietzsche.
And Stirner. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
Stirner has he's like, it's built into his thing that that approach doesn't work by definition, because he'll just call that kind of moral stuff spooks anyway.
Yeah, and it's
kind of concepts and that they're throwing at him.
It's like what I was saying before. It's that person's character that they're not aware of, that they're covering all these little bits of themselves up with moral proclamations, which is probably reading Hyatt, and I've probably taken this away from him, why I'm so skeptical of morals, like in this way. Like I'm always looking for the character underneath. That's more of the information that's valuable to me. And once you start to look at people in this way, you know, morals in a way start to become less important, because it's like this guy's covering this up because he can't get a girlfriend. Therefore, everyone that has sex, you know, outside of wedlock is going to go to hell. You know, that kind of thing. It's always like a cover up. I find like there's always something in the person's character that they're not being honest with, or they have this kind of common spite in what they are as people, and they just want to go around and condemn everyone because they've just got this quite unpleasant character. And the more,
I mean, that's a lot of the culture war stuff is just this, isn't it? It's
totally.
People have their own issue, and they accuse everybody of the thing that they're doing that they don't like about themselves, and they project it, and they like none of it's
it's not
Lloyd knew all this, you know, everyone like knew it, and but we're all pretending it's not happening now because somehow we know more because we're connected on the internet more.
Yeah. So morals, be careful.
Morals are bad. That's what some people think we just said. They're bad. Stay away from them. They're bad.
Yeah. You don't want to go around necessarily hurting people, I guess, do you? Unless you're a warrior or something, and that's what your job is. You go around and become the neo Achilles or a new Napoleon. I don't know. I don't know what someone like that would do.
Caesar, please, not Napoleon.
Caesar.
You need to go back to your Spengler. You're getting this.
I haven't even started him yet. I've got to get to it.
Wrong.
Yeah.
You don't need to. You don't need to read him. You just set the book as a magical talisman in your room, and you imbibe the
the essence of the book.
Yeah,
and do a thread on it, of course, afterwards.
Also, it makes a good weapon. It's quite fat, my one. If you get the single volume version. But no, he's good. He's good, and some of the stuff about like the Hyatt stuff, and I think he would have been friendly to the Spengler analysis. I think because he does seem to talk about how things are just declining and they're going to be another dark ages, and you know, and there is potential for extreme technological change and improvement. So Hyatt kind of had a bit of that Tim Leary stuff about, you know, the kind of extreme techno-utopian libertarian stuff, but his was a very elitist version of it. Some people were going to get the technologies and make themselves better using the technologies, but most people wouldn't get it. They wouldn't have access to it. They wouldn't have the money or whatever. So that still may come true within a declining civilization point of view. That there's like, you know, things don't just stop and collapse. They like decline, and there will be pockets of things improving for different people, but it's not going to be some happy, clappy Star Trek, everybody in one big federation happy with each other thing, you know?
Where everyone's interconnected and one.
Yeah.
Because, that happens, doesn't it?
But the all is one thing. I mean, in one sense, yeah, of course, but in another sense, what would be the point in anything if everything was already one and you were born and the problem is you forgot that you were one, and then once you remember you're one, then everything's fixed again? Well, what was the point in anything? What's the point? Why start this thing? Whatever started it for, doesn't make sense.
Well, it's because
there's obviously a reason for things to appear separate. And be separate in a certain way. There's obviously that's what it is,
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything new here. It's still like
no, it's what I was saying before. Because first of all, it's a linguistic statement trying to describe something as non-verbal and non-linguistic, and instantly, as soon as you do that, you get into silly territory, right? Like it's impossible to describe these things. So
you can't say all is one without. You can't say the three words without separating. Okay, you say the word a word. You say the word all. Okay, so now you're saying you're separating the concept of all things from some things. So is you're saying it is as opposed to is not. One is as opposed to like you've already done it. You're pointing towards the thing, which is I think we're all agreeing on that there's that kind of thing. So interconnection of things, but it's I mean, like before you start all this kind of like Hyatt's practices and that, you think that you don't realize this, but you think you are the words in your head and your feeling of you in your head is the main thing, and then the world is small and you're the big thing and the world is the small thing. You're the main thing going on, and then you do the practices and that, and then it kind of flips and you realize that actually the world the bigger is the main thing and you're the smaller thing in it. And so you realize you're part of something bigger, but that's not the same thing as saying always one and everything's the same. It's not quite the same. It's not the same thing. So it's like it's something else. But I'm not qualified to understand it.
If you look at it from a Buddhist perspective, and maybe this might help. So they've got what do they call it? Dependent arising, which is their idea of everything being non-separate and empty, which is an experience. This points to an experience, like I suppose a mindful experience and realization. That it's the idea that everything is interconnected and nothing is of itself separate from anything else. It's kind of difficult to describe, but that's basically what it means. But I don't think any Buddhist, not that I'm aware of in the literature, has ever said, therefore whatever you is, the awareness that is there just disappears completely into everything else. Like you don't disappear. The realization is not disappearing. The realization is a realization. But they still go out, collect alms, drink water, and they die. They still have that experience, the monks.
Because even the moment of fruition, the nirvana moment where people like can disappear and you reappear again and you're back in the body and as a person. So it's like it's dependent on you having been this person in the first place to have that experience of disappearing.
Absolutely. Which is dependent.
Although you don't selfless. You don't have an experience of disappearing. You just realize you did disappear when you come back. But like yourself disappears and then reappears, and only once it reappears you go, oh, I wasn't there for a second. But I mean, you have that every night anyway. That's actually what the deep sleep is like. It's just right. You're not conscious. You're not conscious either side of it like you are if you're doing a meditation. It seems to be you have to do the meditation to have that in order to have the lasting benefit in you. Although sleep is a lasting benefit. Maybe back in the day, our ancient ancestors, sleep was enough. You woke up and awakened every morning, literally awakened every morning.
Yeah, I think,
or metaphorically awakened. Both.
Yeah. I think they were closer to nature. That's got to count for something, for sure. I also, just on dreams. So the Tibetans have the yoga of dream and sleep. They think that that's like the most powerful type of mindfulness you can do. And they do I think it's something like 4 or 5 sessions per night, or maybe less than that. Maybe it's like 3 or 4 of kind of interrupted stages of sleep where you kind of wake up and visualize something and try to remain mindful going into the sleep state. And they have it in Zen as well, interestingly, which I actually only found out about recently. So if you're a super serious meditator, you will do something similar to that. Like you will try to stay awake, not awake, but mindful during sleep, which is, is interesting. I don't think I'd bother, but yeah.
I was like, there must be some like deep, there must be some really basic level of something is aware of something, even when you're sleeping, you know. But you obviously can't. You have no access to that. It's obviously here now all the time, all during the day, but you can't access it when you're directly. And the like if you some of the meditation techniques you go into, you can go really deep down. It seems to like for me, it seems like you're going deep down into layers of your brain, and then you're like you have I've had like an awareness of a presence around me, which afterwards I was thinking, oh, that's actually maybe just you're just at that level of your brain, that lizard brain, reptilian awareness, you know, that just survival awareness is really low down in your brain. That you can slowly get down to there and like consciously touch that consciously, whereas normally it's just there in this part of our brain that we're talking about doesn't have access to it, you know.
Yeah.
So there's something like that going on just even a biological, like I'm not reducing it just to biology, but that's part of it. This I just bundle up as a psychophysical way of looking at things, and you know, where you just there's always what you normally think of as the mind stuff and the body stuff at the same time, and you can't separate them ever, even at this high level of things. They're still both. You need both somehow.
Yeah.
You need the separation to know that to have union.
Yeah, which you know these systems all have. So for Zen, it's very simple. It's literally sitting with a very particular kind of posture, and that's literally all they do. You know, and of course the breathing as well. And obviously in Tibetan Buddhism, they've got all sorts of exotic yogas and different things that they do, along with the study and mindfulness. So yeah, all these systems have the integrity of the organism as a base on which everything else is built upon, I suppose you could say. Or the integrity of the organism is critical to have the realizations that they're seeking. Maybe a better way to put it.
Exactly right. It always starts there. You know, like the asanas in the yoga stuff, always like it starts with something to do with the body.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's clearly required to transcend it, obviously, because it has to be there for you to be transcending it. But transcending it doesn't really mean what we think it means, and that comes back to, well, it's your bodies. They're going to be different from somebody else in a different circumstance, so there's going to be differences. So there's already separation and difference, and you're bound to prefer some things to other things.
Yeah.
By having the experiences, going through doing practices all your life and progressing like that or whatever, you're going to preferences will change, but you still have some. You still have like, I guarantee there's some kind of food any kind of Indian guru type guy won't eat.
Yeah.
Maybe but some of them will do anything. They'll break any of the rules to prove the point that they're beyond the morality now.
Human flesh.
It doesn't mean they're doing anything bad. It's like a modern Western thing that if you're beyond morality, you must be doing bad things, but you're not immoral, you're amoral.
Yeah. Amoral. Exactly.
Yeah.
I forget who said it. I think it was someone on the old forum.
There's no reason you would be going around doing bad things. You know, there's no purpose to it. It doesn't. Usually, people are doing those things because they have some kind of emotional or physical sensory structures in place that are compelling them to do it that they haven't looked at, they haven't worked, they haven't undone themselves. It's sort of terminology. Yeah.
So they need the morals to control their low dog behavior. I forget who it was. It was someone on the old forum. They said they were amoral with integrity. I love that. I forget who that was, but that was the best way to say it. It was amoral with integrity. I thought that really summed it up well. The proper position. Well, I don't think we're going to get to the clips. I think we've just done a listener question episode. But good questions.
Yeah, that was good.
Great questions.
Yeah.
I liked it. Should do that more. If we could get some people to ask
I've heard a few
questions.
I've heard a few people discussing the difference between the moral, the behavior of the person and the being enlightened or whatever. But not that many. You know, there's still a lot of a kind of new age boomer kind of mentality that these are just enlightened super sage, wise sage men that don't do anything wrong when they become enlightened, and they're definitely a vegan, and they're definitely don't fight, and they definitely all these things. Probably
sure,
just
sure.
probably many people who have been warriors have been awakened in the technical term. So how do you define these things?
Yeah. How are you? Yeah, exactly. It's not black and white like morals would have you believe. Plus, there's all different kinds of fucking morals anyway. No, all humans have different morals. All sorts of things can seem good. Doesn't make any sense. They're like, there's just one system where everything's okay. To me,
chimps have their own sense of morality as well. It's like built into their.
They really? I didn't realize that.
Into that good stuff. Yeah, there's a good. I forget the author's name, but there's a book I read years ago called Our Inner Ape, which is really good. It's like about how humans are kind of halfway between chimps and bonobo chimps. Bonobo chimps are like the free love hippie guys, hippie chimps, and the chimps are more like patriarchal, hierarchical, aggressive.
Shit.
And it's just, but it's just biology. It's from where they grew, where the bonobos evolved in a slightly different place that didn't have gorillas, and because there was no gorillas, they could eat different foods in a different way, and the other chimps had to be harsher, something like that. And so over time they developed sort of a different social structure because they could get away with it and survive like that because they were like separated by a river or something like this. So it just shows that and then they have ways of behaving with each other and ways of conflict resolution with each other. Like the males and females will do it slightly differently, but the ways of keeping order in the group that are their morals. And like they'll get struck down. They break the taboos. They'll create conflict, and humans are like somewhere in between those two. And according to this guy, and but he's got other books on how the morals. But all is already in there. It's not just like it doesn't just appear by humans later. It's built into kind of social
primatology.
Animals. Yeah. Frans de Waal. What's his name?
Frans de Waal. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
It's. But I mean, like, it helped me understand a lot of Hyatt's point of view of stuff when he's talking in the Radical Undoing DVDs. He's talking about stuff to do with comparing humans to chimpanzee brains and stuff like that. And it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, which is something mystics don't do, and he did. And I guess if you're coming from that position, then your interpretation is going to be different. You're going to be less inclined to, be too moral about these things. If you have a scientific outlook, looks like a good book to get this one. Yeah, well, okay. I think that's 2 hours and 10 minutes. It's quite a long one.
Yeah.
I don't have anything else.
No, I'm ranted out for today, just for today.